Welcome to Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. On this podcast, we journey through the devastating experience of the death of a child. Grief is seldom discussed openly in our culture, and the death of a child makes people feel even more uncomfortable. We approach the topic openly and honestly, speaking to people who have lost loved ones and experts who help care for them. Whether you are a parent experiencing loss or someone who wants to support another going through this tragedy, this podcast strives to offer hope and help.
Welcome to episode number 298 of Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. I'm Marcy Larson, Andy's mom. Today, I have the pleasure to introduce you to Kelly. Kelly is Carter's aunt, so it's a little bit of a different take this week, but I know you are going to love hearing what she has to say. So Kelly has been the CEO of an organization that you've definitely heard about through me. You've heard of Faith's Lodge. Faith's Lodge is a wonderful retreat center where many of my former guests and friends have gone. It is the retreat center that really inspired Luella's Lodge, and I know you've heard a lot about Luella's Lodge here. And I have been wanting to talk with someone from Faith's Lodge for a really long time. So Kelly has been the CEO there for 13 years, but I have to say, there have been some big changes that have happened over the last few weeks. The retreat center that they call Faith's Lodge is still called Faith's Lodge, but the overall organization is now called the Child Loss Foundation, and that is going to include more than just Faith's Lodge, and Kelly is going to be able to tell you even more about that during this episode today. But know that I am really excited to see all that they are going to be able to do in the future to help child loss parents and families as they try to find a road back for hope and healing. So now, just sit back and listen to Kelly, Carter's aunt. Thank you so much, Kelly, for coming on the Always Andy's Mom podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, I am really looking forward to talking to you for so many reasons. But the main one is that you're associated with Faith's Lodge. And I've talked about Faith's Lodge on this podcast several times because I have many friends who have been to Faith's Lodge and love Faith's Lodge. And it's just really exciting to be able to talk to someone who is affiliated with Faith's Lodge and hear a little bit more about what you're doing. And I know you've got some really exciting changes, and we'll talk about that as well. But I do really want to start with talking about your personal grief journey and your family and what ultimately ended up leading you to Faith's Lodge. And that was after the death of your nephew, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Well, first I want to say, Marcy, I am delighted to know that you've heard good things about Faith's Lodge, but I always have to say to people, I'm so sorry that you know about Faith's Lodge, because it's a pocket of people that when you know, you know. And I'm really proud to be here, and I'm proud to hear that people that you know have had good experiences.
Yes. I've not heard one negative thing about Faith's Lodge, not one. And I've heard from so many people who have been there and gotten support from there. So it's just wonderful work that you do.
Yeah. So I guess I'm going to start with my nephew's death, because that's really where the journey begins.
And you can even start by talking a little bit about your nephew, because we like to on the podcast talk a little bit about our kids and about their personalities and what they're like and things like that, because, our kids are a lot more than what happened to them at the end. And so
absolutely,
I'd love to hear just a little bit about Carter.
He is so I'm the youngest of 5. And so number 4 in the family, my sister Carolyn, it's her younger son. And he was, I think about 6 when my older child was born.
Okay.
And he was the neatest cousin to my older son as a boy. And he was always he was into trucks, construction, and could sit at a construction site for hours. My sister would take him, on their little bike, and they would watch. And he'd have questions. And my son got into heavy equipment because of Carter. And so,
Of course he did. Of course he did. Yeah.
and it was fun because like when my son was younger, Carter was starting to get to the age where I don't want to share my stuff with this little baby anymore. And so, but he was very, very kind and really showed my son the ropes around heavy equipment and backhoe loaders and the difference between a backhoe loader and a bulldozer. And there's just he was this great outdoorsman.
Yeah.
Carter was. He loved knowing how things worked. He loved taking things apart and reconstructing them or not.
Yeah. Right.
He was fiercely independent. And I remember one time, and I did tell this story at his funeral because it tickles. It's funny.
Yeah.
He was younger and he talked with a little bit of a lisp, so didn't enunciate his R's very well. I was at my sister's house with the boys and we were playing and it was time to go and Carter had been either, I don't even remember what the transgression was. He was rude to me or whatever. He's a kid. He was like 7. I don't know. And I'm leaving and my sister sends him over. Carter, you go apologize to Aunt Kelly. And he, and I'm sitting in my car and I'm ready to go and he comes by the car window and he mumbles, "I'm sorry." And I said, "What? I didn't hear you." And he goes, "You heard me." Really good. It was really, I loved it. He said he was sorry.
Right. I've done it once. I'm not doing it again.
Yeah. He wasn't going to say, you heard me. So that's something that we say all the time at our house now and with my family. And it's fun. And he's very sweet and he lives on, certainly in our memories and our hearts. And he also, one of his favorite shirts, he was 12 when he died. So one of his favorite shirts, and we've had some pictures of him in this, was a Chuck Norris, The Many Emotions of Chuck Norris shirt.
Okay.
I know you've seen it, Marcy. Or when you see it,
Then I'll know.
You'll know. There's also a version, The Many Moods of Darth Vader. That is very so
right.
fun. So he had the many moods of Chuck Norris shirt. So the first Christmas after Carter died, I had everybody in the family wear Chuck Norris shirts Christmas Eve. And some people said they would and then they didn't. And it ended up that it was just my little family and my sister and her husband and my other nephew that had their Chuck Norris shirts on. And we still have those shirts and cherish them because they're, there's this whole line of Chuck Norris, the weather is afraid of Chuck Norris or,
Right.
Anyways, so I've always tried to do something unique at Christmas for my sister to keep mentioning Carter, because I think that that's one of the things that it seemed like everybody else in our family was so afraid to acknowledge or mention his name, or God forbid they say anything.
Right.
Because they don't want to make her sad. And
right, exactly. That I was just going to say, because they don't want to make her sad and make her cry. And like, you don't understand. She's already sad. You have not made her sad. You've, in fact, just brought to the surface those tears that were just a little bit below. And it's actually making her happy that you remembered.
And so those tears that come out, what she will say, she would say exactly what you just said. And the tears that come out are not always tears of sadness. They're tears of joy that somebody is saying his name besides her.
Right. I remember reading online a few years ago, don't you know that when you say his name, it's like music to me?
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, it is like music.
And we still, there were many years where, my kids are younger. And so I would say, well, and I have a lot of the same struggles. What did you do when Jake and Carter did this? Or, how did you handle it? And just being willing to acknowledge him.
Right.
And that he existed. And you know what? He was naughty sometimes.
Right.
Did you handle this? Or challenges at school or with sports. What did you do when the coach did that to Carter? How do I take the lesson from your parenting and help me with mine?
And I love that you're mentioning it in the everyday.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be the just the special occasions, or also you not acting like he is an angel too. That, like, what did you do when he screwed up like this? Because guess what? They did screw up. They all did.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Those were, yeah. It's fun. And we still talk about Carter. My children are older now than he was when he died. So there are fewer lessons to learn.
Right.
It is talking more about her older son and, well, what did you do when he was unsure of himself once he moved away? And, so I feel I ached, still do. My heart ached for my sister for many years because she wasn't done parenting when he died.
Yeah.
And there was this vacancy all of a sudden. Like, you wake up one Sunday morning and he's fine. He's having his friend over and they're going to the park and we'll be home by 4 because we need to go to JCPenney and get you shoes to, go to this function later in the week. And he never came home. He died at the park. And so there was a big void. And I know that I'm describing to many grieving parents listening to this, including you, Marcy.
Yeah.
I'm describing a void that you know all too well. And my perspective of it is I'm 1 degree outside the epicenter
Right.
of that. And so my heart broke for her and with her,
Yeah.
but not the same because it wasn't my child. It was my nephew whom I was very close to. I mean, the whole family. But I have a different lens that I'm seeing this through.
Mm-hmm.
I can't make any excuses for it. It is what it is.
No, it is what it is, though. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, I can tell you. Can I?
Yeah, you can tell me what happened. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it was August 1st, 2010. So it's going on 15 years now.
Wow.
And he was 12, and his friend came over, and they had gone to this store called the Axeman, which is where it's like military surplus, and it's just this. It's such a store for 12-year-olds, for 12-year-old boys. And they decided they got some tubing and they made their own slingshot, kind of a big, because they wanted to launch tennis balls as far as they could.
Okay.
And so they made this, they were smart, very smart. They made a giant slingshot and they took it up to the park near my sister's house, just about a block and a half away, and tied it up. And they brought, my sister's a tennis player, so they bought like a ball hopper full of tennis balls. And they ran out of tennis balls and moved on to rocks. And the rocks got a little bigger, and they Carter shot one off and never left the slingshot. The rock didn't. So with as much force as it was shot, it came back and struck him in the heart, struck him in the chest.
Oh.
So you're a physician.
Yeah.
My sister is in heart failure research at the VA, was at that time. It was an event called commotio cordis. So for anybody who watched Damar Hamlin.
Yes, I was just going to say, it's exactly what happened to Damar Hamlin. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, drop at that game. That's exactly what happened to Carter. The downside is he didn't have an AED.
Right there on the sideline like he did, right.
To get that electrical impulse back in. So he died. He died, and it was it happened to be my son's 6th birthday.
Wow.
So got a call from my sister. I was in between stops on my son's birthday. My younger daughter was taking a nap, and I got a call from my sister saying, I don't know what's going on. Carter's in an ambulance. They won't tell me what's going on. I'm headed to the hospital. Will you call and see what you can find out? Because I need another person. And she couldn't get a hold of her husband at the time. So I said, of course. Yeah, I'm on it. And I couldn't get a hold of anybody. And she called me back and said, will you meet me up at the hospital? I'm almost there. Let's just meet there. And I said, can do. She did call me when she got there before I had a chance to leave, and said he's gone. And I didn't really understand what that meant, but I got it. It took me a moment, because how can you imagine?
I know.
That a 12-year-old boy is gone. Like, wait, what? What? So my husband, We ran the kids over to the neighbor's house, and he brought me up to the hospital. I met my sister up there, and by the time I saw her, she was standing with the chaplain, and I didn't love what he said. All he was able to say to her was, "This is a tall price to pay for a boy being 12." And
Yeah.
I don't know. That
Yeah.
didn't
Didn't
sit
sit
well.
well. No. It wouldn't sit well with me either. No.
No. And I immediately, so my background at that time was I've been an event director for years. So, and kind of large scale events like golf. So made for television, ESPN, NBC. I've been a
Mhm.
tournament director in the PGA Tour, LPGA Tour. And I immediately went into event mode because that's what I know.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I can function, all right, who's here? Who do we need to tell? Carrie, who do you want here? And she was saying, just, I don't want anybody at the hospital. I can't handle all of this. Will you come and sit with me while we talk about organ donation? And yes, I will. So I called another sister and said, do not come. I need you to call everybody else. Don't come. This is Carrie speaking. Don't come.
Mm-hmm.
I will call you. And I really stepped into a role that I was the only person she would talk to. And so I became the conduit of what does she need? And she didn't know, and I didn't know. And this is something that I've heard from many grieving parents is you're thrust into this space where you're suddenly supposed to be an expert on what you need.
And you have no idea what you need.
You have no idea. So how do you tell people what you need? I don't know.
I just remember so many times. So people brought me food every day, right? There's this sign up to bring me food. And we had food forever. And whenever people would drop food off, they would say, their parting words would be, call me if you need anything. Call me if you need me. And as I shut the door, each and every time, I thought in my head, I will never call you. I will never call you. No matter how sweet they were, no matter how nice it was, no matter how close or far I was from that person, in my head, I knew I would never call them because I had no idea what I needed. So how could I call them to tell them what I needed when I didn't have a clue?
No clue.
None. This is why when an acquaintance of mine sent me a message and said, hey, I'm going to Costco. What can I get for you? I could come up with something.
Yeah.
That is a question I can answer. The other kids like the big Costco muffins. Could you get me some of the big Costco muffins? I can answer that question. But if she would have sent me a text saying, hey, what can I do for you? Can I get you something? Do you need anything? I would have said no because I hadn't a clue. But really, the muffins were great because I didn't have to think of breakfast for the next several days, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
because
anyway.
you're nibbling anyways. You're
right,
not.
right.
And people bring these big meals. I ended up having to call a friend and say, we need a chest freezer ASAP. Because no one's eating anything right now, and the food won't stop coming.
Yes. We had a friend that brought over a freezer that sat in our basement, an extra freezer.
Yeah. Well, the same friend who set up the meal train without talking to us first and just basically was like, this food is coming. I called that same friend of ours and said, Sue, we need a chest freezer.
Right.
Or you need to hit pause on the meal train because we're getting 3 meals a day and she hasn't eaten in 4 days.
Right.
I can't get her to eat.
We had to change the meal train to come. I think we changed it to every other day, and then we changed it to twice a week. We actually stretched the meals. So Andy died in August as well. Andy died in August. We were getting meals until December. Okay.
Oh.
We didn't have people that originally signed up that far, but it was every day and it was overwhelming and I couldn't even fit it in my refrigerator and it was crazy. But yet I didn't want to tell people I don't want your food. So we ended up stretching it out. So it just went on forever, which honestly by November, December, having a meal come twice a week that I didn't have to think about was a blessing. It really, truly was. But in the first few weeks, it wasn't even a huge blessing.
No.
Because it was just too much, right?
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
And that's how people know how to help. They want to do something.
Right, exactly. And that's why I didn't want to tell him to stop. But like,
Yeah.
hey, it was my friend Michelle. It's so funny because you played the role of my friend Michelle very much the same. She had clipboards of like every time somebody dropped something off, she would write it on the clipboard. If she would be gone, she would give it to my sister-in-law. She was in charge of the clipboard. We had a cooler outside so that if somebody rang the doorbell and I didn't feel like answering the door, there was a note that said, "Please put the food here." And so I didn't have to even talk to anybody because I didn't like people hugging me at that time, and too many people were hugging me. So anyway, you and Michelle did the same job, I have to tell you.
Yeah. And Michelle, I had immediately started a database. I recorded every gift that came in, every gift from
Yes.
flowers to money to food to who mowed the lawn and, all. And just because I knew she'd want to thank everybody or I would do it for her.
Right.
And I didn't need her to tell me. I had already started sitting in her dining room and I'd already started an obituary. And she walked by me and just grabbed a pen and wrote obit and,
Yeah.
and kind of put it in front of me. I was already on it. It was, I don't know. We didn't need to speak that much because she didn't really want to talk to anybody. But I was the one who they let in the house every morning. I was the one that everybody came to and said, "What can I do? What do we need?"
Mm-hmm.
And one of my favorite stories is that she wasn't eating. And I said, "Carrie, I need you to eat something. At some point, you're going to have to eat because we got a big couple more days ahead of us.
Yeah.
And I need you standing." And she said, "I don't want to eat." And I said, "Does anything sound good? Anything?" And she said, "Kevin's mom's cashew salad." Kevin was her boyfriend junior year of high school. Like,
Okay.
okay. All right. I got on the phone and called Kevin's mom. "Hi. You might not remember me. I know you remember my sister. Hi." And she read it in the paper. That was a whole nother thing. And I said, "Mrs.
Yeah.
Mick somebody, she won't eat, but what she's asking for is your chicken cashew salad." And you wouldn't believe it. That salad was at the front door in 2 hours. And I just loved it because she ate. And it just felt like I just love that I was able to call. And that person
just dropped everything and just did it.
I'm on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm not used to going back to these moments.
No, that's
I
okay.
don't do very often. So, yeah, the accident itself was newsworthy. So,
Right.
I had stepped into that role, that event role right away.
You are so my friend Michelle. I tell you, she was everything. She was our news person. And we had somebody at our church who actually worked for one of the news stations. And she said, the media is going to be all over this. You need to put somebody in charge of that. And that was her too. She did. Yeah. She was you. You are her.
I sat my sister and brother-in-law down and said, "Listen, we either get to control the narrative or let them. So
yeah,
I need a statement. I'm gonna draft a couple things here. Why don't you review these and tell me what you like? And here are some pictures that I chose. What do you want me to share?" And in doing that, I gave quotes to the 2 major newspapers, all 4 news stations that were all requesting interviews. "Come out to the park where he died. Can we interview on camera?" And I didn't want to be nobody wanted to be on camera. I said, no, but I'll give you a statement and an image to use if you want. So that was, it was a hard place for her to be, I think, because that story was so, who dies like that? Not very many people. And so the story stretched quite a ways on the internet. And she started reading them at some point and reading the comments and saying, what kind of parent would let their child go to the park alone?
Like, it's a block and a half and he's 12. Like, every parent would do that.
How about a normal parent of a 12-year-old boy who's really pretty responsible? And, he did something that, a lot of ways all of us could have died as children, right?
Yes.
Because we did really stupid things.
You're right. Mm-hmm.
Not all of us, not all the kids make it. And, it wasn't her. And I think that as humans, we're conditioned to want to accept some responsibility, some level of responsibility. And Carrie, for so long, if I didn't let him go to the park, he'd still be alive.
Oh,
If I, just all those things. And
all the what ifs that you do on yourself, right? You
Yeah.
do that. We all do
Yeah.
that. We all do that.
Well, and then also the what ifs of going back to a 12-year-old boy being a 12-year-old boy. She kicked herself for, well, had I known he was going to die, I wouldn't have yelled at him when he doused me with men's cologne before I left for,
Right.
I was all dressed up to go to a party and I had to change because, Carter thought it was hilarious. And it probably was pretty funny, but Carrie got really mad and she's like, I wouldn't have been that mad at him. Well, okay.
Yeah.
You can't kick yourself for that. You had a normal reaction.
Yeah.
And it was she's been hard on herself, but 15 years later, she's in a better place, if there's such a thing.
Well, I've talked so many times about the thing is it's much easier to feel guilt than it is to admit you are powerless. And that's such a thing, right? So I think that was it. She really was powerless in this situation, but if she hangs on to guilt instead, then it makes her feel like she's got a little more control. And if she had more control, then that means she can prevent it from happening to her other son, right? So I think that's why you end up doing that to yourself.
Yeah, that's really well said. Really well said. She's come a long way. We took her and her family on vacation with us. Couple weeks after Carter died, we had already rented a little cabin at a resort up north that Carrie and I had gone to as children. And I said, why don't you come with us? I booked us a bigger cabin. So, come step out of the space you're in.
Yeah.
And because, she couldn't go to the gas station without feeling like someone was saying, oh, that's that kid's mom.
I know. It's just the same with us. I mean, we were on all the news stations too. He was the senior head chorister for the Grand Rapids Choir of Men and Boys. So were all these videos of him singing and his beautiful voice. And I'm a pediatrician, and it was just really good news. It was good news that we were, on our way to a minor league baseball game, get rear-ended, and he's instantly killed. That's a good news story, but it does make you feel like when you walk into the grocery store that everyone's looking at you. Like,
yes.
That's her. That's the one from TV. That's the one that I see because they pull my picture off our office website. And, I felt like my picture was everywhere. Andy's picture was everywhere. It just, you didn't feel like you could go anywhere, even though the vast majority of people probably didn't know. Right?
Yeah. Maybe they didn't.
They weren't probably paying attention. We live in a pretty big, we live in Grand Rapids. It's a pretty big city. There may have been some people that would recognize me going through the grocery store, but probably the majority didn't. I just felt like they all did.
But that feeling is the only thing you know.
Right. Right.
So we brought him on vacation with us, and I remember I am not a good ping pong player, but I talk a big game. And I use a lot of space when I play ping pong.
Okay.
So we were playing ping pong in the lodge at this resort. And she started laughing at me. And I loved hearing her laughter. But then she realized she was laughing and ran out crying. And I asked her later, I said, hey, you okay? No, you're not okay. But,
what's going on? Yeah.
What can I do to support, I'm sorry if I embarrassed you in the lodge with my giant ping pong playing. Right. And it was, she told me, she said, I can't laugh because my child died. It's not fair to him if I'm not grieving. Like, she hadn't yet found the balance between, it was too soon. She just said, my child is dead. How can I stand here laughing at you playing ping pong? She was in a space where, and I guess I'm learning more about what that really meant the more grieving parents I work with.
I think we all remember the first time that we laughed and how it feels like a betrayal, because that's really what it feels like.
Yes. And she was in that space for a year,
Wow.
and I didn't try to fix her or change it. I just tried to walk beside her and
Yeah.
not play ping pong in front of her. But, yeah. So they ended up going to, I helped as much as I could.
Right.
And her therapist, she found a therapist. And months after Carter died, this therapist said, there's a place you should go because you'll connect with other people. And she and her husband and son went to Faith's Lodge, which at the time had been open for only a few years. And it's not meant for me, as it was meant for the grieving parents and their surviving children.
Yes.
And she went, and I remember taking a walk with her after she got back, and she told me it was the first place that she felt she could take off the mask that she'd had to create for everybody around her.
Mm-hmm.
She could cry. She could talk about Carter, and nobody was uncomfortable. Or in the hospital, she said she would be walking down the hallway in the hospital, and people would see her and literally pivot so they wouldn't have to cross paths with her.
Right.
Where she worked. And that is just one example of, nobody wants to, what we talked about earlier, nobody wants to say Carter's name because they don't want to make her sad. And it's like, the sadness is bubbling anyways. It's just under the surface of what you see. But she said it was a transformative experience because also at Faith's Lodge, at this retreat they went to, the group facilitator that was there said, you two are grieving different. I see a big difference between how you're grieving and your husband. And she said that to both of them and said, you need to honor and respect each other's, methods, or what is a fissure could become a valley. This crack could get bigger. And I think that was something that was very meaningful for her, because I know that she and her husband have put a lot of effort in, keeping their marriage alive and stable through this. And I think that was an important statement to hear in these raw moments, to remember that his introverted style and her grieving out loud style, they were both okay. They were both good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And just different. And so I really hate hearing the statistic. People always say to me when they hear what I do, like, oh, well, marriages, 50% of marriages fail. You got to choose your battles when you're talking to people, but it's like, no, that isn't the reason marriages fail. Marriages fail because there's other things.
I think it kind of will intensify things oftentimes one way or the other. So if there was some marital struggles anyway, they will be driven further apart. But yes, but I feel like my husband and I actually are closer than we were beforehand. So I just think the emotions are just intensified too. Mm-hmm. And we grieved very, very differently. I mean, I've told this story in the podcast many times, and how my husband went back to work a few weeks after Andy died, and he was very encouraging that I just needed to go back to work. You just need to go back to work. Just go back to work. It'll be so much better if you go back to work. And I went back to work, and it was an ultimate disaster. I mean, it was terrible. I was so not ready to be a pediatrician, seeing kids and families every day. I just couldn't do that. But for him, it was really helpful. And it was a way for him to really be able to kind of get outside of the grief for a few hours. And he thought it would be that for me, but it really wasn't. I think it had a lot to do with what I did, but also we just grieve differently too. So.
And it's okay.
Yeah. And it's okay. And he's the first to tell that story. We know we speak to different groups now, and he pretty much tells that story every time, about how he encouraged me to do something that he shouldn't have, that he regrets doing. I mean, it was fine. I actually don't I don't feel as bad about it as he does, really, because I think it kind of taught me that I wasn't ready and that there were some significant things that I needed to work on. And if I hadn't tried, I wouldn't have known.
Yep.
But yet you just grieve differently. We just do.
Yeah. And it's okay. And it's good.
And it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
So she had that amazing experience then at Face Lodge.
Yeah. And we went about our business.
Yeah.
You know, and I still was present for her as much as I could be. And this was just sort of in the back of my mind. I'm not really looking for a job. I had a job that I really thoroughly enjoyed. Felt very fulfilled in the event world. And I will say everything I learned in doing those events, I dealt with CEOs and you know, I've had to sell sponsorships. I've dealt with recruiting, managing, training volunteers, and you know, raising money.
Yeah.
I didn't really understand that would translate well to nonprofit, but I was playing golf. So it was the summer of 2012. It wasn't quite the 2-year anniversary of Carter's death, but I was playing golf at an event, and it was a memorial event for a baseball player that I used to do some work for.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't going to play. And the widow of the baseball player who was deceased called and said, Kelly, you need to play. You need to come. So I decided to go, and I showed up. And on the 6th tee, as many people do, you get backed up on shotguns and you introduce yourself. Hi, hi, hi. You know, and you talk to the different people who are backed up on the tee. And this gentleman said, oh, Kelly McDare, I was told I need to talk to you. I just took a role as the board chair of a nonprofit, and we're looking for an executive director. And I said, oh, you know, thanks. I'm not looking for a job, but let me know what it is and I'll keep my eyes and ears open. And he said, it's called Faith's Lodge. And I immediately broke out into tears.
I was going to say, I bet you did.
What? Okay. So I took his card and I sat on it for a few days and told my husband, finally, you know, I met this person playing golf.
Did you tell him at the time why you got emotional? Did you tell him that?
No.
No.
Well, yeah, the people on the tee, you know, because eventually his
yeah,
person was razzing him like, what did you say? You know? And so I said, you know, my sister was a guest at Faith's Lodge. Sorry, you know.
Right.
He did the round of golf, sat on the information for a little while because I wasn't looking for a job, but I felt pulled to at least talk to him. And one thing that my sister did that always impressed me was she had annual pictures of her family. So we didn't have any shortage of images of Carter through the years with his family, you know, with his brother, with his dog. And she was very present for her children. With her hospital schedule, she was able to really tag team with her husband in making sure that someone was home with the kids as much as possible. And I found myself in the current role I was in, shaking my kids out of bed at 6 a.m. to get them to daycare so that I could be to work by 8. And then I felt this pull, and I went and talked to this person about this executive director role at Faith's Lodge. I did not have much nonprofit experience. If you call a PGA Tour event a nonprofit event, you can technically, but it's not really the same.
No.
And so I talked to him, and he said, what would you want? We'd really like for you to consider taking this role. And I said, well, you have to pay me, and I want to get my kids on and off the bus every day. And they said, okay, sounds good. So I ended up taking the role of executive director of Faith's Lodge, and I was the 5th executive director in 5 years. I thought, what in the hell am I doing?
Right.
Because what am I supposed to do? I'm not sure. And
clearly no one's lasted very long.
No.
Yeah.
13 years later, here I am still.
Yeah.
And it was actually really pretty neat. I got my footing pretty quick, made some changes on the staff, the small staff. It was financially a listing ship at that time, and I thought, how am I going to write the course on this? And I think, I don't know, we've been successful, and it's been great. But I did not take that job. I talked to my sister first and said,
Yeah.
this is what's happening. How do you feel about this? Because I won't do this if you don't like it. I will not put myself in a role that might make you uncomfortable,
Right.
I guess is a word that we probably used. And she absolutely said, get after it. Get in there.
Right.
If you want to do this, do it for you, not for me. Do it because you want to.
Right.
And I will, she said to me, I will be beside you the way you've been beside me. I'm sorry again.
No, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful story.
Yeah. So that's how I ended up at Faith's Lodge. And it's been, I think it's good because for me, like I said earlier, I'm not at the epicenter of the grief. I'm one degree in that circle of grief, you know.
Yeah. Right.
So I can sit in this role and I am I have an undeniable passion for this mission to help grieving parents.
Yeah.
And to do that, sometimes I have to take the emotional hat off and put on the business hat and say, how can I work to generate more revenue? What do I need to do differently to cultivate more donor relationships? What do we need to be doing to this facility to ensure that it will last longer than, you know,
Us. Yeah.
like it's been this balance for me of having a passion and investment, an emotional investment in the outcome, and then being able to be a part of successful outcomes, really.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, it's beautiful. Yeah. So talk about Faith's Lodge and what they have offered, and then I know you've got other kind of exciting news to talk about too. But you can talk about their past and kind of what they historically have done.
yeah. Faith's Lodge was started by a family whose oldest daughter was stillborn, and they put together this organization because after Faith was born, they didn't have anywhere to go. There was nobody to talk to. They felt, now this was back in 1999, so the social media piece obviously wasn't really a big part of giving people a platform to share. And the only support group she could find was in the basement of the hospital where she delivered Faith. And she's like, I don't want to go back there. I don't want to go back there. And once a month, really?
Yeah.
So she and her husband, they decided, let's build a place. And so they did. They donated the land. They built a building. So Faith's Lodge was built intentionally for this purpose of creating a gathering and connecting space for grieving parents, period. And they wanted to make it free initially. And so I came on, you know, and they weren't charging very much. And there was no economic equation that would allow me to pay the mortgage and not collect money. Like I got into the fundraising world pretty quick. And I also realized as we went along, so they offered retreats. It's open year round. Faith's Lodge is still open year round. And what were just grief retreats in general, kind of a big funnel. What we've done over the years is listen to what grieving parents need or want. Separating people by age at the time of loss was very important. That wasn't done when my sister was there in 2010. We've evolved from just age to some very specific age groups at the time of death to different retreats for relationship to the child, bereaved mothers. Your common denominator is that you're all grieving moms. Doesn't matter how they died, age, or cause of death. Suicide loss, homicide loss. There are a lot of factors. So parents get to self-select on what basis do I want to connect with others? Is it the age? Is it the type of loss? You know,
and some are for whole families, right?
Absolutely. Yep. So we have retreats for grieving families. And when I say grieving families, it's the grieving parents and their surviving children under 18. Yeah. We aren't equipped really for that young adult, which having young adults. I understand the desperate need that they have to find connection, but we aren't equipped for it. And what we try to do is find other organizations that we can help people find. But our family retreats are for
Yes.
the children who come are under 18. And it's great. We've evolved from when my sister was there in 2010, where she had to bring all of her own food, to we provide all the food now. We even have a chef come in for once for every retreat and do a cooking, like hands-on cooking. Can be a demo. You end up eating if you don't want to participate. It doesn't matter. But today retreats, Child Loss retreats, are, they're typically 4 days, 3 nights. There's 2 group facilitated discussions. There's one-on-one counseling available. We offer yoga and meditation, and we have a massage therapist come in for the grieving parents. We have, like I said, that chef experience. And it's there is certainly a schedule, but there's a lot of unstructured time. And some of the greatest stories that I hear are from parents who have come to a retreat and said, I wasn't sure I wanted to go. I wasn't sure I wanted to put that much effort into getting there. But I found myself up until 3 a.m. talking to 2 other parents in this great room, and we didn't realize what time it was because we just clicked.
Yeah.
We just connected. I also love being there when you can hear the group down at the fire pit and they've got a fire going and there's laughter.
Yeah.
And for many, many parents, it is the first time that they laugh or that they allow themselves to laugh because they're standing with a beer maybe around a bonfire and they all have the same thing in common.
Yeah.
And they can laugh together because they give each other permission. And it's just, it grips my heart and just is like, yes, this works. This is working. So.
Right, because they know that they can laugh right now, and if in 3 minutes they're crying, it's okay, and no one's going to judge them for it or anything. Because I think that's part of the problem is that when you are now out in the community, you feel like you're being judged, even if you aren't. You feel like you are. Like, if I start laughing, are they going to think that I'm over it? And that I don't miss Andy anymore because I desperately do. Or alternatively, if I am just sad and whatever, are they going to now go say to the neighbor, like, oh, I saw Marcy the other day. She's not doing well. Right? So you have this fear both ways. Like, I can't look too happy and I can't look too sad. And when you're with other bereaved parents, you realize you don't have to have the mask at all. You can be really happy or really sad, and no one's going to judge you that you are doing something wrong, that you're either not as good as you should be, or, better than you should be. Like, everything's all forgotten,
Right. That's exactly it. It's a space. It's a safe space. You're not
completely safe.
You don't have to be anybody but you, and it's okay. And you don't have to worry about making other people feel better. So that's the beauty of what our founders created. And it's what drives me to continue. And it has been an absolute joy working here. And certainly people hear what I say. They ask me what I do and they hear me say Fates Lodge. I often get I get a hand in my face, like, oh, I can't imagine.
Yeah.
You are an angel. I'm definitely not an angel. Swear like a sailor often. And I'm doing work that is important to me, and I'm hoping I'm leaving the world better than, it was. But I know you can't imagine because you don't have to imagine, but there's a lot of people who don't want to imagine that have to live this.
That have to live it, yeah.
Reality. And if I can be a ray of hope, this is energizing work to know that I can be a light in an otherwise dark and cloudy outlook
Right.
for a grieving parent, because that loss, it's indescribable, right?
It
I
is.
don't know how to describe it because I haven't lived it on my own, but I've heard and listened to so many of the grieving parents that have come through,
Mm-hmm.
and
And you witnessed it firsthand, like you said,
yeah,
in not the very first circle, but the first circle out, really. So
yeah.
talk about what's happening now. So what's going on now with Faith Lodge?
I'm gonna add one thing before I tell you where we got. So we've had Faith's Lodge and the Child Loss Retreats, and a few years into my tenure here, I realized that two things. I needed to find another way to earn revenue to raise, besides donor money and retreat revenue. But I also was listening to guests, and you said it earlier. I witnessed it firsthand that parents were telling us, hey, okay, worst thing ever, burying your child. Yep, worst thing ever. Second hardest thing, going back to work after that loss. And we started digging into, what does that mean? Because my colleague, who I hired 9 years ago, she tells a story of her son died. He was an infant. It was a SIDS death. And she went back to work a few weeks after his death. And 3 months later, they were letting her go because they said, yeah, you're just too sad. Like, you just don't get the energy here anymore. So, you're just too sad.
I've just got to relate a story. So I was in college. I was a junior in college, and my mom died.
Oh.
She died over Christmas. When I was on Christmas break, I had stayed home, and the month of January, I came back to school, and one of my very best friends gave me a letter in April that said, "I just can't be around you so much anymore because you're just not the same person. You're just so sad." I've never told this story on the podcast, but it was so hurtful to me that I had some medicine that I used to take for migraine headaches. I poured out an entire handful.
We'll see.
Ready to take them all because I'm like, this is who I thought was one of my best friends.
Ooh.
And she says she just can't be around me anymore because I'm too sad. And then I think maybe I don't want to be around anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Now, fortunately, I had another friend who, found me in that heap and made me call a suicide hotline, and I started doing better. But, and obviously things never got the same with that friend. I did continue to be friends with her for a time after, but I mean, it's really hard when you get something like that, when that's your response. Like, no, of course I'm not the same. My mom just died, and she was one of my best friends, and she was my best friend, to be honest. So it's
Yeah. She was.
So it hurts. It hurts when that's the response. So I totally get that you would get, like, of course she's not the same, but
Oh,
yeah.
It's also, grief is not a permanent condition. You'll carry your grief with you, but grieving and that sadness is a normal response to an important loss.
Yeah.
It's okay. And I think, and I'm so glad you're here today. That the feeling you had then wasn't
right.
Didn't happen.
That I didn't make a permanent decision for kind of a temporary.
Yeah. So taking that spirit, and knowing what my colleague Jenna went through, and then hearing other parents and watching my sister go back to work because there really wasn't any guidance from job, and my brother-in-law went back because I don't know what
else do you do?
What else are you gonna do? You just sit in the house all day and stare at his stuff. I get it, but it was what I asked myself was, could we provide a better, softer landing for grieving parents going back to work? And when I started thinking about that and looking into it, learning that 73% of employers in the United States offer 3 days bereavement leave. I go back to my nephew's death, who died on a Sunday afternoon, and we were pretty quick. We had that funeral Thursday.
Yeah.
And I was pretty impressed. We got that together. But that's day 4, people.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so that employers will say, oh, they can have as much time off as they need. Okay, well, what does that mean? Because how are they supposed to, A, know how much they need, and B, where there's one child, there's often other children. So there are car payments and house payments and tuition, or, you name it.
Right.
There's expenses. How much time can they take off? How much is paid? How much is unpaid? And so we put together a program that was an employer-sponsored benefit that helps support a grieving parent's transition back to work. And we called it Hope Works Here. And it has helped many parents. And the audience for that is their business owners and HR people.
Yeah.
It's a benefit that's free for any company to offer. They can say, this fits our culture of care and compassion. We absolutely want to offer this benefit. They don't pay for it unless they use it. And it's structured in such a way that you get it's very fair. The total cost is somewhere between $2,500 and $4,000, depending on if someone uses a retreat or not. That's part of the package. But we started that, and COVID made the transition coach visits that are included in that package for grieving parents and their teams, made the virtual visits like we're doing today very normal. And so we have now served grieving parents from across the country in this benefit. And I'm really proud of it.
That is really beautiful. Because I feel like, I'm in a pediatrics office, and really they didn't handle it well. It really didn't. They didn't know what to do, and nobody knows what to do. And then people end up saying things that are kind of stupid, and then you're hurt. And so we have gotten through, and obviously I'm back to work full time now, or not full time, but as full time as I was.
Yeah.
Now, but it would be so incredibly helpful if you had somebody that would help guide these employers, because otherwise, who has to do that? We do.
You do.
The grieving people do.
And suddenly you have to be the expert again.
We have to do this, and we have to now educate. Right. I have to be the educator on what I need and what I can handle. And I don't know what the heck I can handle. I don't know. But if they would have had somebody to call. In fact, it's very funny, because I'm going to go back to my friend Michelle. So my friend Michelle, literally, it was about a year and a half before Andy died. She had decided it was time for her to go back to work. And she had said, I think I need to go back to work. It's time for me to go back to work. Would you pray for me? And I said, okay. And then 20 minutes later, she forgot that she had asked me or something. And she said, hey, I'm thinking about going back to work. Would you pray for me? And then I was like, that you literally just asked me that, but okay. And then I followed up with, well, we had a receptionist just leave. You think you might want that job? And she's like, yeah, maybe. And so she interviewed with our office manager and was hired the next week. But I do feel like that was all in a grander plan. But poor Michelle then, of course, she's the person. She's the one. Everyone goes, how's she doing? How's she doing? I'm falling apart. I start to cry. Somebody has to see a patient for me. I'm downstairs. They send Michelle, go downstairs, go see what's going on with her. You've got to be like the conduit, the whole thing, So not everybody has a Michelle in their office to be able to do these things for them.
No. And one of the cornerstones of the deliverables of that package, that benefit, is that transition coach, who's a mental health professional who specializes in child grief. They're coaching in this capacity, but there is a visit with the team before that employee comes back to work saying, all right, here's what happened. Here's what Marcy wants you to know. Here's what she doesn't know, so please don't ask her. Or here's a list of things like you might be tempted to say, I'm going to ask you to try these on for size and get used to these types of statements. And And then, are there questions? And people can raise their hand, which they have, and said, can I still have pictures of my family up at my desk? Yes. Marcy doesn't want you to pretend you don't have a family.
Yeah.
But they're basic things, and there's a lot that people don't know, and they are so afraid, and fear of saying something or not saying something, fear gets in the way and takes over. And we try to remove some of that angst for not only the employee, the employer, but the team that they're going back into.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really been a beautiful offering, and I'm really proud of it because of the additional people we've been able to help. Fates Lodge was built to be a retreat, and it still is, and it will always be there. But not everybody wants to go to a retreat. But a lot of people going back to work still need help getting back to work.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm proud that we were able to find a way to help others.
I love it. That is fantastic.
So when we kind of rolled into 2024, I had said to our board, listen, I think it's time for kind of a brand evaluation update. We are Faith's Lodge, but now we have this other program that's called Hope Works Here. Both still require definition. Every time you say them, they still require some kind of definition. And so we worked with focus groups and an agency and talked about who do we want to be as we grow in this world. And we are, as of May 1st, 2025, going to be the Child Loss Foundation, offering child loss retreats at Faith's Lodge primarily, but we are going to be expanding our offering to other parts of the country. In this world of Airbnb and VRBO,
Yeah.
I can find venues, and I have the formula to do retreats. I want to bring more retreats because it doesn't matter. With 8 rooms and 365 days out of the year, I will always have waiting lists.
Yeah.
Because it's one location. Can I bring more retreats to more people? And so we'll be doing that. We have what is now called Child Loss at Work, which follows the branding. It's the same service. It's an employer-sponsored benefit that's meant to help grieving parents transition back to work. It's now called Child Loss at Work. And in the midst of all this, there is another organization here in the Twin Cities, Minneapolis area, who had started about 5 years ago, providing immediate and practical financial support to grieving parents to really lessen the financial burden
Mm-hmm.
of child loss, because it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter your socioeconomic situation. It's expensive to lose a child. It is expensive to bury anybody. And in many cases, if you're out of work for a while, you might, help with that car payment, that mortgage, that
Mm-hmm.
those medical expenses. That helps. Every little bit helps. So this organization, we'd worked so very closely with them. When I told them about our branding idea, they said, hey, let's bring it together. Let's be together on this. So they are, as of May 1st, part of the Child Loss Foundation, and it'll be the Child Loss Believe Fund. And we will be able to offer immediate and practical financial support in meaningful ways. Right now it's to grieving parents in Minnesota, but the plan is to expand that. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm just taking baby steps because my goal has always been, from the moment I took this role, my goal has been to help families like my sisters. What can I do in this role to make their lives a little better? I could never, ever lift the heavy burden of grief on the shoulders of my sister, but I could walk beside her, open doors. I could just be present.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a way for me to be present for her family and others that have the unimaginable loss of a
Right.
child. And I love it. I love my job. Is that weird to say?
No. It is not weird to say. It is not weird to say. It is just like me, what do I do? I tell stories of kids who have died. Everyone thinks that's weird. I mean, really, in the grand scheme of things, that's what I do on my days off. My days off when I am not working as a pediatrician, I talk to parents whose kids are dead. Okay, not what seems like a really happy, uplifting thing, but honestly, it's a privilege. It is an amazing privilege to be able to walk beside these families and
Yeah.
help them tell stories of their really amazing, amazing children. And what you do, yes, it's hard work, but it's a privilege to be able to walk beside people in the darkness and help show them a little bit of light.
It absolutely is. And I love talking to someone, someone will call and I take phone calls too. I'm answering the phone here and they'll talk about their child. And when they don't use their name, I ask them,
I know.
tell me who we're talking about
I know.
so that I can carry them with me.
Yeah.
And,
I would say
and
maybe 10, 15% of the time when I get an email, they don't say the name of their child. And I will always write back, and that's my first question. First of all, it's always, thank you for reaching out. But it's, could you tell me your child's name and a little bit about him or her?
yeah, I want to know. I want to know.
Yeah.
So yeah, it really is a privilege. That is the perfect word. And when someone buys a memorial, for instance, with us, it really, from the heart, I will tell them, it is a privilege that you chose us to help honor your child. Thank you. Like,
Yeah.
it's a big deal. We don't take it lightly.
No.
We love it. So
Oh, I have just really loved talking to you today. I appreciated everything you had to say. I would love to kind of keep working with you on some different things because it certainly, the more we can spread messages of hope and healing, the better.
I agree. And I love finding other organizations that are doing similar work because we know we can't be everything to everybody.
No.
And if I am not finding other resources and leading people there, then I'm not doing my job. So I really have also enjoyed, time that I took listening to your podcast. I have a hard time. I don't read a lot of memoirs. In my free time,
Uh-huh.
I don't seek out more stories because I get them all day long. But it really was a pleasure listening to yours, like in preparing for this, and I will probably be a listener.
Well, good. Well, good. Well, thank you again.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Marcy.
Thanks for listening. If you found this helpful and would like to support the podcast, please leave a 5-star rating and comment. To help financially, you can type Andy's Mom, one word, to the number 53555. This provides a link to GiveButter, which allows donations through PayPal, Venmo, Apple Pay, or credit cards. GiveButter will provide a receipt of your tax-deductible donation, or you can visit the donation page at andysmom.com/donate. Always Andy's Mom is a registered 501c3 and can receive donations through Thrivent Financial and Benevity. Marcy loves hearing from listeners. Please feel free to reach out to her via email at marcy@andysmom.com or on the Instagram or Facebook Always Andy's Mom accounts. Sign up for the email list to get weekly episode links as well as pictures of Marcy's guests and their children. Together, let's work to inspire hope, one day at a time.